No separation exists between us and books. Simulating oneness, this program analyzes, reviews, and breaks down books across all genres through a conscious lens. Synergizing literary theory, philosophy, psychology, spirituality, and the occult, Conscious Book Reviews co-creates a new literary consciousness transcending objective interpretations. Welcome one, welcome all to the very first Conscious Book Review. So, today I'm going to talk about Kazuo Ishiguro's Never Let Me Go. My name is Ian Kadanak. I run the website Conscious Writers Tribe. Go check it out. A lot of cool stuff on there. So why did I choose this one first? Well, because I just reread it 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I was like, okay, I have to talk about this. And that's how I'm going to approach a lot of these. I'm going to only do stuff I've recently read or just have read, because there's a million books I've read before, but I want to approach it from a state of lucidity and freshness. So this book though, I'm going to pull from 3 different sources for this review and analysis. The first is The Failure of Humanizing Education in Kazuo Ishiguro's Never Let Me Go and the journal Literary Interpretation Theory by Nathan Snanza. And if you want a little bit more information on the role of education and its successes and failures, I have another video on the YouTube channel that goes into this novel's view, role, and use of education. And I use Nathan's article. I agree and disagree in some ways, so check that out. The second source is Look in the Gutter, Infrastructural Interiority in Never Let Me Go by Kelly Rich. And that was in the Modern Fiction Studies Journal. And third, I am sourcing from an interview with Michael Silverblatt on the podcast/radio show Bookworm that was done with Mr. Ishiguro. And that is in the summary link below. I linked that podcast. It's 30 minutes. It's really good. So I think one of the main themes first of all, this is Conscious Book Reviews. So why would I be covering, in my opinion, a staple of atheist literary fiction? Because Mr. Ishiguro is an atheist, pronounced, and a lot of this book goes into a lot of the themes of atheism. And so I believe that polarized individuals on the spectrum of light and dark, or with anything, are the strongest, can come up with the deepest reflections and the deepest meanings. And when we look at the spectrum of connection with God and no connection with God, as with every other polarization, basically when you get to both ends, you ask the same questions, you just approach things differently and you believe things differently. And the questions that start to happen in this are interesting, because these students are in this are dealing with eugenic world building, and their organs are being harvested and all this stuff, but the kids aren't asking the questions like, why me? Why this? How do we escape? They're asking, why are we doing art? Why can we experience true love? They ask, I don't want to say silly questions, but they're asking maybe not the really big questions. They're not asking, why are we dying? When am I dying? Why is this happening to me? And on the interview on Bookworm, Kazuo talks about how what he wanted to do with his novel is just cut the lifespan basically to a fourth, because we live 80, 90 years usually, and he just wanted to cut that down. But basically, these kids go through the same process that we go through. And they ask the same questions, and more importantly, they ignore the same questions. And as conscious individuals, we shouldn't push the big things like death to the back of our minds. We need to confront them to move forward and to become a stronger character in the world. And so do atheists, so does everybody. But no matter what side you're on, you shouldn't ignore these questions. But these students are ignoring these questions. And what's interesting from this atheist point of view is that why if we all know we're going to die, but this isn't even atheist, but if we all know we're going to die, why do we love? Or why do we work? And that's a lot of what we're confronting in this novel is, why do we do art? Why are we going through this education process if we're just all if our organs are going to be harvested in these brutal ways and our last parts of life are going to be spent in pain? Why are we doing that? Right? And that's pretty deep. And this starts to connect to the children as utilities, or humans as utilities or infrastructure for society. In this world, there's a medical cure that cures cancer. So if humans have access to new organs, then they're going to be able to live for, it's not said, but a seemingly long time, much longer than we do now. And organs are the limiting factor in that quest for immortality, at least at this level. And it's a pretty crazy concept, because Hailsham shelters clones from that status of being utilities or being infrastructure. But even though Hailsham's trying to be perfect, it's kind of a weird infrastructure. It's got fireplaces. I mean, fireplaces that are never lit, and it's dark and eerie. It's not a happy place. And no matter how hard you try, the environment, the environment's going to reflect the energy of the people and of the place. Like if you go to somewhere, I'm sure if you went to a Holocaust camp or a concentration camp, it wouldn't be a very happy place. You kind of get a bad vibe. And I'm sure like when I go to casinos here in Las Vegas where I live, I'm like, oh, this is kind of a bad vibe. This is where not so great stuff happens. But then if I go to my yoga studio, I'm like, oh, this is great, right? And you know, the clones start to, or the students, whatever we want to call them, they start to see themselves as an infrastructure in a weird way by searching for Hailsham everywhere and seeing their lives through the lens of Hailsham. When Ruth, Tommy, and Kathy go out to the boat, they literally, Ruth and Tommy see Hailsham in the boat. They say that it's as close to Hailsham as they got, and minus the boat, like this is Hailsham. And it's weird that they're projecting like that, and Kathy can't understand that. But these students are, in a sense, so in the boat scene, the boat is decaying and it's all ruined and stuff. But these students, or at this point they're adults, Ruth and Tommy are decaying also. Their organs, their bodies are decaying because they don't have the means to live anymore. And that's why they have this connection with this boat. And a little later on, we'll discuss Kathy's projection, Hailsham projection, and overcoming that with her driving in the countryside and all that stuff. And it's sad because these students have the status of Hailsham that they're carrying with them. But then when Hailsham gets closed down, it's like they understand they're going through this crisis because they're the only ones that remember, and they know that everyone's going to die. So the only thing that's going to be left is the art collection of Hailsham, and then it's just going to fade off into memory. And it's also kind of funny that that hotels are just going to be built all over this. That hotels from the people that are harvesting them are going to be built over there, the place where they found a soul. And this now gets into another theme that I want to talk about, which is the education. And they're getting put through a humanizing education. And a humanizing education does not produce as humans. It produces a human given a soul. And I'm sure all of us have been through like private or public education or homeschooled. And the point is to assimilate us into one being, and it's to produce singularity on some levels, right? That we are given this soul. And that's been used for a long time in history. And there's a lot of controversy about that, is that when we're given a soul or given this archetype, that can produce a sense of othering, that we have a soul, you guys don't have a soul, we're superior to you guys. We have this model of reality that, if you don't have this model of reality, then you're not a human. And that's kind of a weird divide that we have in our society right now. And connecting back to the infrastructure, the clones were built from the gutters, as Ruth put it when they were in the town, that the clones are modeled off of crackheads and the homeless, because the humans, the normal humans, want to separate themselves from the clones and what they're doing in this crazy world they're building as much as they can. So they try to just put the lower rungs of society into those positions, because if they put people who they put themselves in there, then they would feel worse, because they know that, yeah, it gets into some weird stuff, right? And that's just thinking about that and how we treat people who are homeless, or treat people like that. And what this is basically saying is that they don't really have a soul and they don't matter as much. Another thing that's kind of crazy about this book is that we're seen as, we get confronted with what happens to a whole generation that's deprived of art. And the other schools that don't get art, they're not humanized. They basically live a life to be a donor, and they never get the opportunity to do anything. And I think Ishiguro is getting into some analogies or some allegories of class consciousness and the crappiness, the crappy nature of just working bad jobs your whole life, because aren't basically, in a sense, people who don't take education seriously, don't have the means, don't get educated, they work these jobs that are really hard on the bodies and stress them out. They live these stressful lives and they die before 50 because of disease. Aren't they almost akin to these clones in our society, that they aren't even given an opportunity to live? And they are, but that they're put through so much stress because of their status in society, that they're the underbelly of us. They're what makes us function. They're the infrastructure for us. They're the ones that make our life so much easier and give us the opportunity to live longer, just like in the novel. And I think that's really harping on that point, that that this is happening in our society, but this is just this is sped up. This is just in your face and more. But if we look at it over a total life, that's just like the lifespan. That's like 1/4 of what's happening. This infrastructure, them giving their donations, is like us exploiting people in the lower class, which is 1/4 of that. And that's pretty crazy. So let's go to Kelly Rich's article and talk about the end. So this is a really crazy line, some of the most beautiful writing. If we're talking from a review point of view, the writing in this novel is beautiful. The storyline is beautiful. You connect with the characters. You feel this weird duality of being jealous of their Hailsham experience. Like, wow, this is great. But then you get the contrast of like, holy crap, I wouldn't want to be there because I'm going to get harvested one day. But it's like this great environment because, usually the cool kids aren't the cool kids who do art. It's the athletes or, the cool kids. But there it's like the kids who aren't good at art, like Tommy, are the ones being antagonized, which is kind of a funny scenario. So at the very end, on page 288, when Ruth is looking over the valley, it says, I was thinking about the rubbish, the flapping plastic in the branches, the shoreline of odd stuff caught along the fencing. See, moving back to infrastructure projection. And I half closed my eyes and imagined this was the spot where everything I lost since my childhood had washed up. And I was now standing here in front of it. And if I waited long enough, a tiny figure would appear on the horizon across the field and gradually get larger until I'd see it was Tommy, and he'd wave, maybe even a call. The fantasy never got beyond that. I didn't let it. And though the tears rolled down my face, I wasn't sobbing or out of control. I just waited a bit, then turned my back to the car to drive off wherever I was supposed to be. So this is crazy because she's right now we're finally seeing her move away from the mythology of Hailsham, because we all create mythologies and issues. We all create mythologies in our life that shield us from the reality of our life and what's going to happen to us, mostly death, or even whatever you want to call it. And that's what this book does, is pits the mythology of Hailsham against objective reality. Because that's what they're doing. Because they're trying to live through Hailsham, and they're thinking, they're using that as a means to escape the objective reality of their imminent doom. And do we not do that in our reality? Do we not focus on our imminent, what's going to happen to us? Which is pretty, and as conscious individuals, we cannot do that. We cannot use meditation, yoga, crystals, whatever, to escape what's really happening, to an accurate perception of reality. We need to use those tools to perceive reality more accurately. And she starts to imagine Tommy, because she's starting to use Tommy as the same thing. And I'll quote Kelly Rich here. She'll explain it better than I do. Her speculation culminates in the reanimation of Tommy, whose figure grows larger and more recognizable the longer she waits. The scene provides the last moment of enchantment in the novel, one final attempt at humanization and meaning-making contra the destructive infrastructure of the state. Yet after imagining this world, Kathy gently takes her leave of it, able to name this passage for what it is, a fantasy. She then returns to the car, leaving this fantastical somewhere for all the wherevers that constitute her infrastructural life. Page 647. Whoa! So it's like she's moved on. She's finally let go of Hailsham. She's letting go of Tommy. She's understanding that this is a fantasy now. She's had the time to come to grips with this, unlike the other students who were just kind of thrown into this all immediately. And it's pretty deep, man. That it's just a really great novel, and I'm sure you guys experience the same things I've experienced in this, and I hope to have enlightened some new points in this review and analysis, talking about them being infrastructure, the effects of humanizing education, and how we avoid death and reality. One other thing I thought was cool was that, how did the kids cope with their trauma? Kathy starts to drive around England, and she just is driving and looking for Hailsham everywhere, and she's using the flow of the wheels, the turning of the wheels to remove herself from the frozen state of trauma. Tommy uses his rage to circulate energy throughout his body to get the trauma moving, to not have to sit in his trauma. And Ruth uses pessimism for her mechanism, right? And I think that's one cool part of this novel, that he explores those issues and doesn't shy away from their trauma, doesn't shy away from the fighting and the infighting, and Ruth being like, Tommy never loved you. And the deepness of that. And that creates a beautiful novel and creates the triumph of Tommy and Kathy even better. Oh my gosh, one thing I forgot. One last thing. So let's find it right here real fast. So when they go and meet Miss Emily, or when they go meet Miss Emily, and they're talking, and the other teacher, and they're talking about, and the headmaster, and they're talking about like what happened, and the big revelation comes out, like, you guys aren't getting deferred from the cloning program. This is what's happening to you guys. We did this to show that you guys even had a soul, right? Does anyone remember how this interaction ended? It ended with the guys they're like, sorry, we have some people coming to bring a table. You guys gotta get out of here. You guys can't hang out, sorry. So they consider interior design more important than these clones reality, these clones talking and reminiscing. They consider that way more important than that. Quoting the article, yet this interruption is no random choice. What the men figured as shadowy intrusions into domestic life, their obsession with interior design reminds us that their house can never be a retreat from the world they designed, nor from the crueler world that conditioned it in the first place. it's like, whoa, they're trying to use this interior design. They're like these world builders, these world creators, but they're never going to be able to escape the trauma. This is their way to cope with the trauma, just making their house look really nice with interior design. It represents one of the two possible ends of the Hailsham experiment, either total instrumentalization or total privatization, both bleak features of the state's cloning program. Wow. So that's my review and analysis. Check out the other video on that goes deeper into the whole educational experience. I draw from John Taylor Gatto. We talk about outcome-based education, humanizing education, what it means. Can you create a soul? Is it right to create a soul? Othering, colonialism, all that good stuff. Subscribe if you guys want to see more. I'll see you guys next time.